Okay, here we go. Here we go, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I need to start the Super Peer. I started the YouTube channel.
Oh, yay.
Hello, everybody. Just give us a quick second here because we're doing a dual stream here. Allow. Sorry. Enter backstage, and this is like watching your parents figure it out. Yep, yep.
What buttons do we push?
Go live.
You're about to go live.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. All right. So we're trying to do two things at once here. We are streaming live on YouTube, and we're also streaming live on a platform called Super Peer.
Why is that?
Because, there we go. Because what we're doing is giving you on YouTube a taste of what our Mended Light members get, which is, oh my gosh, we've got a towel hanging up. How unseemly. People can't know that we use towels. There we go.
Covered up.
We've got a new Mended Light membership where we are, every month, we've got new courses on healing from trauma, on mental health and emotional health, on relationships, on parenting, on marriage, on dating. And this month it's grief. We're launching a new grief course starting on Monday. And as part of
Okay. I love you.
As part of the Mended Light membership, we do a book club.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we have relationship courses. We have live Q&As. Oh, that's not good. And we have a book club, right? And then we have fun swag and Mended Light merch that we give away and things like that. So, and we actually give away a cruise every month, but that's another conversation because we don't want to spend too much time dwelling on it. And so basically these are like DIY therapy, right? Do it yourself. And so we don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but we wanted to give you guys a little taste of what it would look like if you wanted to join. And then if you do want to join, we'll give some info at the end. So this is our live book club discussion.
Yes.
For our members, it takes place on Super Peer, which is a fun platform, video platform, where we can actually like interact with each other, and we can chat, and we can even do a thing where they like bring you up on stage, so you're like on the video with us. If that's your thing, cool. If that's not your thing, and you just want to live behind a screen and chat, that's cool too. But it just the membership site as a whole just gives you a ton of therapeutic resources. Through our relationship foundations course over conflict, closeness through conflict. He just changed the name of it.
Closeness through conflict is the new name of that course. We have a course on personalities, on love languages, on family councils, on couples foundations, which is dating and healthy relationships, on blended families. And next week we're launching the course on grief. And then we've got a course on healthy dating. And then we're going to have a course on childhood trauma. And we're just going to have new courses all the time.
Yeah. So that's the fun oversight of what that looks like. And so you're getting a taste on the YouTube Live. And if you become a member, you can join us on Super Peer and we can interact a little bit more together. So I think that covers it.
Yeah, well, so the book club discussions, we pick a new book every month. And this month is On Grief and Grieving by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler. And here's the thing, is this is designed so that even if you didn't read the book and you just want to engage on this subject, you can jump in and we talk about it.
Well,
we also have audio recordings where we do summaries and discussions of the book as we're reading it through the month.
And frankly, I'm kind of proud of the ingenuity of that, because it's basically like a podcast, right? Like our book club discussions are you and I getting on, teaching concepts from the book, kind of like a podcast.
And then sharing deeply personal experiences.
Deeply personal.
Sometimes awkward and painful.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of fun, and it's kind of like join in on what fits you best.
Correct.
Yeah.
So for those who are watching on Super Peer, who are our members, we're going to field the questions from you first.
Okay, why does this keep happening? Due to unstable internet connection? But our internet connection isn't unstable.
I don't know. But the show must go on. And you know, we may just have to redo it for the super peer people that
Yeah.
if the super peer is not working, but
That's
we've got to continue right now.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
okay, so we're gonna dive in and talk
How?
about
Okay, wait.
what.
So, okay, super peer people, this is what we're gonna do. If we can get super peer to work, jump over to the YouTube live.
Well, here, restart the stream and say that so that they can
Okay.
hear you.
Technical difficulties, no bueno.
Hang on, wait for it. Wait for it. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, our internet is not unstable. Why is it saying
I don't know. Okay. If you're watching on Super Peer right now, Super Peer keeps dropping out. This has never happened before. It has always worked well, but today it's not. So if you're one of our Mended Light membership members, hop over to YouTube. We're doing this live to give everyone a taste of what you're already experiencing. We'll keep the Super Peer going until it dies again, and then we're just gonna keep going. So that's what's going on. You know this couldn't be easy technology-wise, right? Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to start in. We're going to be talking about grief and grieving. Aside from the big why, I guess I'd ask how I can cope with the guilt, the feeling that I didn't do enough despite knowing that I did. Uh, so the 5 stages of grief, right, that you've always heard about: uh, depression, anger. No, sorry.
I cannot hear you. Did
You
we
can't hear
check
me?
our audio?
Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And as part of the bargaining stage, before you lose somebody, you tend to make bargains, right? You tend to make bargains with God, with the universe. If you're not going to lose them to death, but it's to divorce or to something else, and you try and make bargains like, if I do this, will you stay? Will I do that? Will you stay? But when the loss has already happened, bargaining looks more like asking yourself, what if and if only. And that's getting in this headspace of these fantasies of what I could have done differently. And the thing is, what if and if only is actually healthy in small doses. And the reason why is because your daily existence is the loss. Your daily existence is that they're gone and they're not coming back. And sometimes that is too overwhelming. And so the brain needs little refuges, little places of escape. And to entertain what if and if only for short little bursts can actually be healthy because it serves as that type of fantasy and an emotional release valve. The issue with that, as you pointed out in your question, is that you get stuck in guilt and you get stuck in self-loathing and you get stuck in feeling responsible, and you know that you're not. But we often know something rationally and feel emotionally something completely different. So how do you get to a place of acceptance? Excuse me. How do you get to a place of acceptance emotionally? I would try the following exercise. Invite the spirit, if you believe in the spirit of your departed, into the room. And if you don't, if you think they're just gone and that's it, okay, then do an imaginary exercise where what if they could show up? Like the ghosts of A Christmas Carol. What if they could show up? What would they say to you? Would they blame you? Would they tell you that you should live a life of shame and guilt? Would they say you don't deserve to be happy again? I've had over 100 therapy clients do this, and every single time they tell me that the person who has died, would want them to be happy, would tell them not to blame themselves, and would tell them, you did everything you could, and I want you to live a good life and a full life. Every single time. That is what the departed would say. And so what I would say to that is that guilt is about changing a behavior, right? And then it needs to be let go. But if it's not a behavior you chose, or if it's something you can't change, it's already done, then the guilt serves no purpose and you need to release it. And your loved one would encourage you to do just that. So that's my answer to that question.
Do you want me to read these
Yeah.
questions that are coming up over here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
If you could read the question.
Yay! Okay, so you can submit questions in advance, and you can also ask questions live, right? So the questions that get submitted in advance, we kind of like try to group them together. So we have a couple questions about multiple losses. I lost both people who raised me, and both my old dogs in a span of 2 years. And the last of my family moved out west. How can I ever feel good about a future without them? How could such a future be as good as the one with them? It's been 4 months since Mom died, and I feel like I'm still living on scorched earth. And then, okay, here's the other question, also on multiple losses. How dealing with how dealing with multiple losses in a row affects the grief cycle. I lost my dad and my grandma in the last 2 years. My boyfriend lost his only grandparents within 6 months. It's been hard on both of us. We're both getting through it.
Okay. So two parts. Let's talk about the grief cycle first, and let's talk about what life could look like moving forward. How can you ever be as happy? How can it ever be as good as it was before? First of all, with the grief cycle with multiple losses, it's compounded, obviously, and it stretches longer, and it's harder to get past it because it feels like you lose everybody, and it feels even more like I don't want to make more attachments because I'm just going to lose them. I don't want to make more connections because I can't bear the pain of having my heart shattered again. What they talk about in this book on grief and grieving, how important it is to compartmentalize, meaning take one person and spend time mourning them. Because if you try and mourn them all at once, it's just this massive misery, right? And to take time with each person to remember them, to honor them, to memorialize them, to think of them, to look at the pictures, to put away their things, and then to move on to the next one, right? And so both parents and dogs and people who don't have dogs sometimes make light of that, like it's not the same. And it's not the same, but they are part of the family, and the love there is very, very sincere and real. And so to take the time to actually focus in on one person. And then sometimes you'll need to repeat that. And the fact is, you don't move through grief and then it's just gone. You will always miss them, which leads us to the second point, the second part of the question, which is how can life be as good as it was before? Honestly, in some ways it can't. In some ways it absolutely can, but like there's a hole in your life that will never be filled simply because no one can replace a parent. No one can replace really anyone that you lose. There's no one who's exactly like them who's going to have the exact same role in your life or the exact same connection with you. It's unique. The uniqueness is part of what makes it special. It's part of why it's love. And so you have to make peace with that's always going to hurt. It doesn't always have to be an ever-present sharp pain. It can be kind of a low-key dull pain. No one's ever replaced my mom. And in some ways life has never been as good without her. And in some ways, it's been just as good or even better. But the fact is, that type of connection is gone for me now. Right? That specific connection is gone for me now. And so I make peace with that by doing my best to honor her and to transition from feeling hurt and pain to feeling like I celebrate her and I'm grateful for her and I try and do right by her memory. So all of the, we're getting so many questions, folks. We won't have time to answer all of them. We're going to do the best we can. And if we don't get to your question, we love you and we want to give you the support we can. Excuse me, which is why the membership site exists. I apologize.
Bless you.
I got seasonal allergies.
Yeah, and I just want to, I've typed this on the chat in Super Peer, but I just want to, this is new. This is our very first book discussion that we're doing here. So,
yeah.
Yay.
We'll be more polished.
Yeah. But, people that want to interact with us more, anybody that's joining us on Super Peer, if you have a question you want to ask us live in chat, or if you want to have a question you want to ask us live on video, just let us know, type it in the chat. We'll bring you up on stage if you want to remain anonymous, we'll answer it. But we're just going live on Super Peer is our first priority, and then besides that, we're just going through the questions that have been sent in, and then of course interacting as much as we can through YouTube. But there's so much chatting going on there.
Okay, let's see what. Oh, okay, that's just a different question.
Yeah.
That's a technical question that was asked.
Okay, perfect. So, surprise grief, hits you out of nowhere. I would like to know why grief bites you in the behind when you least expect it. I think I've dealt with things, and then grief can knock me off my game.
This is different for different people. When my mom passed away, my sisters were a wreck immediately. I got home. I was in another state. I came home to Arizona from Utah, my sisters were wailing and just broken for all week. And I think kind of subconsciously, you'll forgive me for quoting The Office while we're talking about grief, but I am me. So, but there's a great episode in The Office called The Michael Scott Paper Company, where Michael and Pam leave Dunder Mifflin to start their own paper company, and Pam is freaking out, and Michael calms her down, and then later Michael's freaking out, and Pam calms him down, and they make the observation that in a relationship, only one person can be panicking at a time, and the other person will kind of automatically step into the role of comforter. And when my sisters were falling apart, my dad, my brother, and I think just kind of instinctively said, okay, well, we need to be strong right now, and kind of stepped into that role. And then for me, I didn't feel the reality. This is actually part of denial. I didn't feel the reality of my mom's loss for about 4 months. I was in a comedy club. I wanted to call her and tell her something funny that happened that day, and I couldn't. And even though I knew rationally she was dead, and I had certainly cried some, that day I just couldn't function, and I just laid in bed and sobbed for hours and hours and hours. The thing about denial is it's not just the classic, I'm literally denying that this happened, right? You can acknowledge and know that something happened, know that the loss is real, without emotionally letting that pain in. It's your brain's way of protecting you because it's too much, right? And so it staggers. It staggers it. It's called staggered grief. So your question, why does it hit you at unexpected times? Probably because your brain isn't letting you feel it all at once because it would be too much.
Well, and you also talk about like stuffing your grief.
Yeah, that you need to be regular. That you need to cry when you need to cry. That you need to take the day off when you need to take the day off. You need to talk when you need to talk, and you don't need to go out and engage it with life and have fun if you're not feeling it. Like, by all means, take the time just to isolate. People think isolation and depression are bad, and we need to avoid that. But the fact is, sometimes isolation is what you need to escape all the pressures of life and of just interacting with people and just feel things. And depression is a natural response to losing someone that you care about deeply. If it turns into chronic, long-lasting depression that keeps you from living your life, that's another issue. But feeling depressed over a loss of a loved one is a natural response. And so you need to be regular with that and not stuff it, not deny it, not keep it from being felt. By all means, if you need to go out to your car or you need to go to the bathroom, so you need to keep your composure for a few minutes, do that. But don't, when you feel it, just say, I can't feel this right now. Excuse yourself and go feel it. Once it runs its course, you have a good cry, you'll generally be able to function again. So, great question.
Okay. Ambivalent grief. Could you talk about how to grieve well in situations where you're ambivalent and the grief is somewhat surprising? Like, I'm thinking about the situation of the death of an abusive parent or the miscarriage of a baby
Conceived as a result of a sexual assault.
Yeah, or the loss of a loved one who suffered with long-time dementia, where there might be feelings of relief mixed in with grief, then feelings of guilt and shame in response to the relief.
And I keep jumping in with these. I don't.
Yeah, no, you're great.
Okay.
I'm kind of
fielding a lot of questions.
Fielding and organizing questions.
Okay. But please,
so yeah.
If and when you have anything, jump in.
Normally we don't normally do this, but in live events, normally I talk more.
Okay.
But you're doing such a good job.
Hey, thanks.
Way to go.
All right. With ambivalent grief, we have to embrace the complexity of human emotion and of grief. There is a great movie called A Monster Calls. We actually use. I react to some clips from it in our grief course. It's based on a book. It's about a young boy whose mother is dying of cancer, and there is an imaginary monster who was made out of a tree who basically comes to teach him about grief. And the boy has a nightmare where his mother is falling into the depths, right? The cemetery breaks open, he's there with her, she's running, she falls in, he tries to hold her hand to keep her from falling into the depths of the earth, and he can't hold on, and he lets go. And he doesn't want to speak the truth about what that means. And the monster makes him speak the truth, and the boy says, I just want it to be over. And And the boy hates himself. He wants to be punished. He provokes bullies so they'll beat him because, on the one hand, he doesn't want to let go of his mom and he wants her to be there forever. And on the other hand, he just wants it to be over. All the suffering of her chemotherapy, not just her suffering, but his, of seeing her suffer and of being on the edge of a seat. Is she going to live or is she going to die? He just wants it to be over. And of course, he wants the outcome to be for her to live. But he knows that she's not. And he feels guilty for letting her go and not wanting to suffer anymore. And the monster teaches him, it's not one, that it's not his fault, but two, that he's a complicated beast. Humans are complicated beasts. That you want your mom to live, but you also want an end to your own pain. And you think that makes you a terrible person, and it's just human. It is perfectly natural and normal to have complicated feelings about complicated losses. The types of things we talk about here. If someone dies and they were awful to you, no, sorry, I'm not sorry, but I'm gonna keep quoting movies because I'm me. The Transporter, there's a Jason Statham action movie, but the heroine, her father is a mobster and he dies, and she cries. And she says, he was a bastard, but he was still my father. Like that you can be hurt by someone and what they've done, and still care about them. Or you can mourn somebody twice because their brain went first, like Alzheimer's or dementia, and then you mourn their body. Or you feel like it's a beautiful new life that you're bringing into the world, but it's the product of trauma. Give yourself permission to not say what you should be feeling, what you should be doing, that it's okay to feel whatever you need to feel, and that it's probably going to be a lot of things, and that doesn't make you a bad person, it just makes you a person.
I love that. Okay, so we have some questions from a super period people, and then we're going to get to some of our YouTube questions. So, how can I know, and you kind of touched on this, but a little bit, specifically, whatever. How can I know when it's too much? Example, when crying is too much, like I've gone too far into the crying aspect of grieving, when the depression is too much, if letting my emotions felt, and if I'm letting in my emotions, feeling them, like it can be overwhelming.
Yes. And so if I'm understanding this question correctly, yes, I understand I need to grieve, I need to cry, but when is it taking over?
Right. When did I go too far into depression? Like, and especially this can happen, the book talks about this, when you have people in your life that don't understand, and they say, hey, it's been 6 months.
You should be in acceptance by now.
Yeah. Or we're worried about you, you're isolating too much, you know?
Well, and so first of all, trust your brain tells you what you need, right? People who haven't gone through what you're going through, or who have, but their experience with it was just different,
right,
may try and, with good intentions, tell you where you should be, or that they're concerned for this, that, and the other. And one thing I love about the book is it talks about friends trying to cheer you up and drag you out into social situations, and there are people who are grieving that go along with it and then they regret it, and others who draw a boundary and say, hey, I appreciate your concern for me, but this is what I need, right? This is what I need right now. I need to be alone. That isolation and depression are natural responses. So how do you know you've gone too far? I don't think there's too far in terms of what you need to feel, right? I think there may be, if you're in danger of losing your job, or if you're not interacting with your children, or if,
So I have a question.
Yeah.
And you've heard me all the time say this question. Like, is this serving me?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, and recognize, like, so many layers, complicated grief, and what you brought up about, is this threatening other parts of your life, right?
Yeah.
That it's becoming imbalanced to the extent that you've decided it's imbalanced, and there's nothing wrong with reaching out for support, and it's very good to reach out for support, right? To friends and therapists and family, like, whatever's supportive, but asking yourself, is this grief serving me? Like, is the depression serving me? And that was a big thing for me in reading this book, to realize how much depression is a natural part of grief. And I looked back in hindsight in different experiences I've been through in my life, and I kind of like judged myself for being depressed, like oh, that was too much, and I was like, oh no, that was just grief, and it was really healthy, and I needed to do that.
Yes.
Right.
Well, and to that end, I I'll tell a very short version of the story. I had my very first therapy client when I was in graduate school. Was a woman who'd lost her husband, and she was afraid of grieving, and she didn't want to let herself, because she just felt like, she says, what if it consumes me? What if I start crying and I can't stop? And I can't tell you how often I've heard that question since. I'm afraid if I start crying, I will never stop. And the thing is, you will. But the fact that you feel that way shows you just how deep it is, and you need to have not just a good cry, but many good cries. And there's no such thing as it's too much. There is such a thing about maybe being strategic. Excuse me.
People just want to talk to you.
There's about maybe being strategic. In other words, I'm gonna, during my work week, like I took time off for grieving, but I have to work because I have to eat. During my work week, I'm gonna take bathroom or sit in the car and cry breaks. But I'm gonna set aside Saturday, and I'm not going to I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm literally just going to sit in my home and feel this, and then not avoid it when it happens. Like, really let yourself feel it. But I don't think there's such a thing as too far into it, as long as you're still functioning on a macro level. And on the macro level, I mean life overall, right? If you're not functioning for a day or for a weekend, that's good. That's actually really good. Like, you need to feel that. So, great question.
Okay. Guilt. Aside from the big why, I guess I'd ask, how can I cope with the guilt? Like, so why did it happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the guilt. You know, the feeling that I didn't do enough to... Oh, did you already answer this one?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I think
I'm sorry.
Put down
I'm
twice.
sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. So we have a couple questions about self-blame. How to...
And I'd like to answer 9 at some point. I like that one.
Oh, okay. Okay, just self-blame when it comes to grief and grieving. And I guess that's kind of along with the I didn't do enough.
Yeah. Well, I guess the question to ask yourself is that actually true? Because there's two ways to approach that, right? There is, I'm blaming myself even though I know I shouldn't. Like, there's nothing to blame myself for. Or I blame myself because I could have done more, right? If there's really nothing to blame yourself for, but that's where you find yourself, that could be survivor's guilt. That could be just wanting to feel productive. And we often, I think, blaming ourselves comes from, it's leftovers from the desire to do something, right? We don't like to feel powerless. And so before something happens, there's a loss, we like to believe that we can do something to stop it, because that feels powerful instead of powerless. But after the loss, we couldn't stop it. And most of the time, there's nothing we could have done to change the outcome. But we have this residual leftover, I should have done something. And in that case, it's time to let it go. What if you could have done something? Maybe not to stop the death, but like to connect more before they died. My sister had that, that there were things left unsaid between my mom and her. And I remember her just wailing and crying because there was conflict that hadn't been resolved, and she knew that she wouldn't get the chance, right? And how hard that was for her. To that, I repeat what I said earlier. What is the purpose of guilt? Because I'm not someone to say guilt is never a good thing, but guilt is like nitrous in the Fast and the Furious movies. Like, you flip the switch, you hit the button, and it gets you where you need to go faster, but the car doesn't run on nitrous, right? So guilt is about a behavior that you chose that you can change. And if you didn't choose it, or if you can't change it, then it serves no purpose, and it's time to let it go. I had another thought on that, and it'll probably come back to me. So sometime during this live, I'm gonna go, ooh, here's the other thing I wanted to say about guilt, and then I'll share it. But
awesome. How to prepare when you know it's already coming? So anticipatory grief.
Anticipatory grief. When you have anticipatory grief, you're already grieving before the loss occurs. Someone's got a terminal illness, for example. Someone's going to war. That you're on edge and anxious for the loss that is to come.
And you had an interesting experience. You unexpectedly, very unexpectedly, lost your mom in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And then about a decade later, your cousins that you were very close with and your aunt passed away.
My mom's sister, yeah.
Yeah, and that was terminal cancer, right?
Yeah.
And you guys, the one cousin was like specifically, you guys are like kind of twins of each other and best friends.
Yeah.
And you guys talked about it, the difference between losing your mother, knowing it was going to happen, and not knowing it was going to happen.
And which is worse, right? Is because she's like, on the one hand, you didn't get the chance to say goodbye. You didn't get the chance to
do all the last things.
To have all the last conversations, And I said, yeah, but I also didn't have to deal with months and even years of dread.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it's not the Olympics of suffering. It's just different. And this is such a crass way to say it, but there's pros and cons to both. But when you know it's coming, how do you deal with that? The best way is to, that Tim McGraw song, Live Like You Were Dying, or in this case, like Live Like They Were Dying. How are you going to spend that time? And don't stress over, can we make this time as good as it can possibly be? I guarantee you, if you're having conversations that lead you to bury the hatchet, if you're having conversations that lead to forgiveness and peace and mending fences, if you're spending time just enjoying each other, making memories and looking back on the memories that you have, it's enough. It's enough. And beyond that, making plans for the future, that's enough, and that's a beautiful thing. And so how do you prepare? It's going to hurt. And you make room in your heart for that. That grief is the price that we pay for love, to experience love. But one thing that we liked a lot from this book is that grief is also a gift. It's how we heal, but it's also an essential part of being alive, because it means that there was somebody in your life who mattered deeply to you, deeply enough to mourn them and to hurt over them. And that's bittersweet, but it's also really beautiful. How do you prepare? Don't avoid talking about it. Don't avoid facing it. Be direct and blunt and candid about what's going on. Because the more you're in denial about it, the harder and heavier it will be, because you're not dealing with it.
Yeah. We have quite a few questions from widows, specifically maybe younger widows, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to kind of group a few of these together, but like they're in their 40s, they still have kids at home, and so there's so many needs to be met. They keep putting their grief on the back burner, right?
Yeah.
Or widowed, and they've never felt so loved and accepted by a person, and now they've lost their person.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like they're grateful for the time that they had, but how do they keep going on? And I know that's a lot of questions all wrapped into one.
Okay.
But like widows.
Let's start with keep putting the grief on the back burner because you've got so much going on. I mean, this is a compounded version of just something you, Alicia, were talking about the other day, which is being the CEO of Mended Light, being so heavily involved in cinema therapy, having our family, our children, me, which is, I'm a tall order in and of myself. I'm high maintenance, folks. I just am emotionally, not fiscally, but emotionally, I'm pretty high maintenance. and you've talked about the taking time for yourself and prioritizing yourself, and I think that's something that.
Well, my exact phrase was, I had put so much effort into creating a safe place for everyone else.
Yeah. I
have neglected the fact that I don't have a safe place for me. Like, I didn't include myself in that equation.
Yeah.
And that was like a tough realization that I had after screaming and yelling at my children.
See, we've got all sorts of problems. So take that, which I think a lot of, especially mothers, experience, and compound that by, and now I'm doing it on my own. Right? It's big and it's heavy. And you were talking about, in your case, just saying, no, I'm doing this for me.
Right.
Right? And the people in my life can just kind of, you didn't say this, but they can just kind of deal with it. Or better yet, like they can evolve to make space for me to do that. Is a better way of saying that than deal with it.
Yeah.
But they could grow, so
Well,
because I matter too.
Right. Well, and like, what makes me less important than you or the children or
Nothing.
like nothing?
Yeah.
But that's what, like, that's the situation that I've created.
Yeah.
Right.
I enabled, but she
Bless you.
just thank you. And so what does that look like? I think it looks like turning to family and friends. A lot of times people say, if there's anything I could do to help, just let me know. And you go, okay, I will. But then we don't. We don't want to ask for help. We don't want to be a bother. If you have family and friends who can take the kids for an evening, for a weekend, for a week, you know, and not just as a one-time thing, but as an ongoing thing, as you take time to just grieve, or just to sit, or just to do nothing. You don't, because you don't have the time to isolate, or you don't have the time to feel depressed, and you kind of need to. You need time alone, and you need time to grieve and feel sad. The other thing I would say is, don't be strong for your kids. By all means, like, don't rely on them to be your therapist. Don't rely on them to help you through your grief when they're grieving themselves. But allow them to see that you're hurting too, and go through it together. You could still be the strong figure that they turn to. Did you watch The Adam Project with Ryan Reynolds?
I did.
Do you remember the scene where he's in, so The Adam Project, time travel movie, Ryan Reynolds is in a bar where he knows his mom is having a drink.
Right.
Because she's lost her husband, she's gone out for the evening, she's a single mom, and young Ryan Reynolds is a real pain in the butt for her.
Right.
Whereas older, more mature Ryan Reynolds is regretting how he treated her as a kid.
Yeah.
And he gives her the advice of, you're so good, without saying, hey, I'm your son from the future. He just listens to her and pretends that he's piecing it together. And he says, maybe you're so good at acting like you have it all together that he actually believes you. And so all of his grief and all of his anger, he just throws at you. And what he needs from you is to see that you're hurting too.
Yeah.
And he needs, and then you can go through together, because he feels alone because you're trying to be so strong. He feels like he has to be, and that's part of why he's such a punk. You know?
Yeah.
And I remember, well, I had this experience just a few weeks ago with our daughter Lydia. I was really sad. I was having a really hard day, like fetal on the ground hard day. And she came in, and I didn't even think about hiding it from her. I mean, I didn't go do it in front of her, but she came in, and she just held me as I cried. And you might think that's not something you should put on a child. And I agree, because I'm in the sense that I'm not opening up to her and saying, here's all my problems, and I need you to fix her.
But you're also not pretending. Like,
but
you're
I'm not
being
pretending.
real.
And letting
Life
her,
is hard sometimes.
well, and letting her wipe away my tears and tell me that she loved me and draw me a picture. And it did cheer me up, and I let her see that. She felt like she did something to comfort me or to be there for me, and it was good for us. And it's good. She's such a compassionate little soul.
She is. She really is. She feels deeply.
So let your kids into that process.
Okay. Oh, so actually, I know we've talked about widows quite a bit, but I actually wanted you to maybe share a little bit. Like, so your dad was a widow after your mom died. Unexpected.
Widower, yeah.
Widower.
Yeah.
He was in his late 50s?
Mid-50s, yep.
Mid-50s, unexpected. And what was that experience? And your dad's very... we didn't even know each other when your mom passed away. But just knowing your dad, like, he's the strong one. He's the reliable... Like, you are your mom in our relationship, and I am your dad.
It's very true. It's very true.
And what happened, for him?
Well, he's an interesting blend, because he is a stoic, macho, man's man, closer, get it done. But he's also very tender-hearted and very decent and affectionate. But he approached grief as yes, I'm sad she's gone, and I know she's gone, but sitting in it isn't going to change anything, so he threw himself into his work.
Yeah.
And he didn't seek counseling, he didn't... He's just like, I'll visit her grave and I'll cry, and then I just got to get back on with living. And he had a mental break where he experienced anterograde amnesia, where he lost 20 years of his life. And my siblings were freaking out because he remembered that mom was dead, but he didn't remember how or when. He recognized his kids. He's like, "You're older." He didn't recognize their spouses, and he didn't know his grandkids. And it was trauma induced amnesia, he got his memory back within a few days. I mean, but
Didn't stay there.
yeah, he didn't stay in that memory loss, but he had a mental break because he was pushing himself too hard and not letting himself feel it. And grief demands to be felt. The only way through it is through it. You can't go around it. You can't go over it. You can't refuse to pass through it. It will be felt. And the question is, do you do it willingly? Recognizing, by the way, that we don't want grief because grief hurts, but the fact is, the grief is not something to be afraid of. The loss is what hurts. The grief is what heals, right? The grief is how we get there. I remember what I was going to say about guilt. If you feel like you could have done more, is you heard forgive yourself for not forgive yourself for not knowing what you know now before you knew it.
Yeah.
Right? Is a very popular phrase, and I think that's very true. There are things that there's no way you could have foreseen. There's no way you could have known that this, that, or the other. Like that, little Timmy, you let him ride his bike to the baseball game. He got hit by a car. If only I hadn't let him ride his bike to the baseball game, right? Or if only I hadn't asked my husband to go to the store to get some milk, and there's a car accident or something. You know, where we blame ourselves. If only, if only, if only. But the fact is, you can't stop living. Life is inherently dangerous. You can't tell people not to ride their bikes, not to do this, that, or not to go for a drive, not to pick up the milk, because life is in the experiences, and just being alive is inherently dangerous. There's no way.
There's risk.
There's risk, yeah. Maybe it's not dangerous, but there's risk inherent to being alive that you can't prevent.
You can't control everything.
And so you didn't know this was going to happen.
And when you experience a trauma, your gut reaction might be to try and control. Like that might be a coping mechanism. And
you feel like you could, like you wish you could have controlled it, and so you really want to believe you could have. So forgive yourself for not knowing what you knew before you knew it. Like you had no idea that this was going to happen. I also had an epiphany recently, because for years I've been struggling through my own insecurities, my own fears, my own weaknesses, having an opaque idea, like vision of where I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. And then that vision, that idea of who I want to be is getting clearer and clearer the more I work at it. But the phrase I want to share with you is forgive yourself for not doing what you knew before you grew. That you can know what you want to be, or you can know what to do and not have the strength to do it, or not have the ability yet. You haven't grown into it. Back to A Monster Calls. Beautiful scene. You should watch that. I know I watched it on the plane. You didn't watch it with me, but like I was. You remember?
You were sobbing. I looked over and I was like, "What's wrong?"
You were watching. You were watching like Crazy Rich Asians or some happy movie, and I was just like.
I think I was listening to an audiobook.
Yeah, you were.
You should watch movies.
But you did watch Crazy Rich Asians on a plane one time. I do remember that.
I occasionally watch things. It happens. It happens occasionally.
But I was a mess. And there's a scene where the little boy is talking, his mom is telling him, he's like, "What's the next treatment?" And she says, "There's not one. Like this was the Hail Mary, and it didn't work." And she reaches out to take his hand, and he pulls his hand away from her. And she says to him, "I want you to remember that when you were so angry that you couldn't even look at me and talk at me, that was okay. That I understand." And she says, "I'm angry too." But just the foresight, because she knew that he would remember that day and he would feel guilty because she wanted to connect with him. And instead of saying, "Connor, be here for me. I'm the one who's dying. How could you pull away your hand? How could you turn away from me?" That she knew he's just a little boy who just learned that his mom wasn't going to make it. And that he was processing that, and he couldn't take her hand and look her in the eye. And even though on some level, even as a kid, he knew that he should have, right? Forgive yourself for not doing what you knew before you grew. He wasn't ready to embrace that she was going to die, which is the last scene in the movie when he is ready to embrace that she's going to die. And he cries in her arms. Oh gosh.
So we got our YouTube audience says hashtag crying with Jonathan. So now maybe we need to make some mugs or something.
Yeah,
I know
well,
over at Cinema Therapy it's crying with Alan.
I
Over
tease-
here it's crying with Jonathan.
I tease Alan that crying with Jonathan is like winning the love of a cat. It's way easier. It's way harder to do than making Alan cry. He's like the dog. Like you can win a dog's love easy. You make me cry. That's a challenge. Um,
Okay, so we have a couple questions here.
I'm good. Oh, thank you.
We have a couple questions about the loss of a sibling in even when they were kind of young, right? And
This is a real fun hour, isn't it, folks?
yeah, and the feeling of loneliness, but also like other people not relating to that, like losing your sibling. And in one question, like they lost one sibling, and then the sisters pulled away. Like she won't answer their phone calls. She won't answer the door.
So a surviving sibling
Yeah.
doesn't want to engage.
Yeah. So surviving sibling loss.
I would treat that sister the same way Connor O'Malley's mom treated him in A Monster Calls. That even if you don't agree with the behavior, you understand like this is coming from a place of I'm presuming I just lost one sibling and that was agonizing. And instead of bonding together more tightly with my my surviving siblings, I don't want that attachment because it'll just hurt even more if I lose them, right? Or if there's, maybe blame that's going on there, that's something that can be worked through in the future. It's lonely, and it's hard. And what I would say, the older I get, I'm middle aged now. Alicia is forever 25. She just kind of got stuck there in that gear.
For about 20 years.
For about
Great.
But now that I'm in my 40s, it gives perspective of things that clear up just with time. And it's really hard when you're in the midst of them because you want them cleared up now. My guess is that sibling is dealing in their own way, and it's lonely for you, and the time will come when you can say, it was really lonely, and I missed you, and I needed you, but I also understand this is how you chose to process it, or this is how you needed to process it, and that's okay. And that's the time for found family, right? Without closing the door to your blood family, leaving that door open when they're ready for it, but at the same time, you got needs. And it's the time for friends. It's the time for extended family. It's the time for coworkers who you're close with. It's the time for if you don't have any of that, or if you do have that, but you need people who know exactly what you're going through, it's support groups, which by the way is something that we offer at Mended Light, is support groups with our counselors. Go to mendedlight.com to learn more. And so yeah, there's that.
Okay, so suicide. And I know there's so many layers to suicide.
Yeah.
But the grief process due to suicide.
So processing the suicide of another person.
Yeah.
So we have a comment. Oh, Jono, you're so soft. Thank you.
Hey, soft is not the right word I'm looking for, but you got
Oh,
this,
there's another.
Jono. Sending a hug. Thanks for sharing experiences and being emotional.
Okay.
In a positive way. You're emotionally tender-hearted. You're tender-hearted.
Soft just took me back to my elementary school sports years. That's what the coaches called me. Anyways, Decker, you're soft. Stop crying. Oh man, Lydia really is my daughter.
She is. Well, and we actually had someone, you can go back and find these on the channel, and John was going to answer this question, but we did a 3-piece series with a dear friend who lost her son to suicide.
Lark.
Yeah, and she's written a beautiful book. Do you remember the name of Lark's book? I'll look it up.
I've read the name of Lark's book.
I've read Lark's book too. But it was such a beautiful book. So I'm going to find the title of that.
Yeah, because her son died by suicide, and she shared her experience, and it's really powerful. So yeah, Alicia's gonna find the name of that book. It's not an insult to the book. We just read a lot of books and can't always remember the names. But So first of all, don't say committed suicide. Say died by suicide. That's just a committed sounds like a crime, right? And the first thing to recognize is we talk about complicated emotions because you can embrace rationally the truth that quote unquote they weren't in their right mind, and there is no quote unquote actually they weren't in their right mind. That someone who dies by suicide gets to a place where they truly believe, and in order to take that step, they truly have to believe that everyone would be better off without them. That people would grieve and mourn for a while, and then they get on with their lives. Um, and they see this as their only escape. Like I've never heard of anybody for whom suicide was an easy out, and people who are mad or who don't know understand the situation judge it and say they took the coward's way out, they took the easy way out, and that's not the case. There's nothing easy about arriving at that decision. Every single person who arrives at that decision arrives there because they've tried living and they've tried every avenue that they could to stay for their family, to stay for their loved ones. And the type of anguish, psycho-emotional anguish that they were going through is not something that is comprehended by those who've never been there. And so rationally, you can look at it without judgment. Emotionally, you may feel, how could they do this? You may feel like it was selfish, and then you may judge yourself for even having that thought or that feeling, because you know it wasn't, but you still have the emotion. And this comes back to the complicated emotions and complicated grief, that you can simultaneously be glad their suffering is over and sad that they're gone. You can simultaneously feel like they weren't selfish, they were in anguish, and they did what they thought was best, and still have these thoughts of, I can't believe they did this, I can't believe they left, and be mad at them. You can hurt for them and love them and be mad at them all at the same time. And if you're not careful, you'll end up judging yourself and shaming yourself just for feeling all of that, instead of saying, yeah, I'm going through a lot right now. Right? I'm feeling a lot right now.
Well, and I like something you say, like, emotions aren't wrong, they just are,
Yeah.
right? And so instead of judging your response, right? The only time that emotions are harmful is if you're actually harming yourself or someone else.
Well,
right?
Behaviors can be harmful.
Right.
Emotions just are.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
if you're using those emotions to, like, then
yeah,
in self-defeating patterns or behaviors.
And so it's what we choose. It's what we choose to do with them. But the best advice I can give is to look upon the departed with just compassion. When you find yourself in a judgmental space, don't hate yourself for feeling that way, but just kind of gently nudge yourself out of it. Because the departed deserve compassion, and so do those who survive them. And the other thing I would say is, you can get caught up in questions that don't have answers, or that have answers that will never satisfy you. This happened. And I guess the one thing I would say is, a lot of people, when they are left behind, someone died by suicide, they get trapped in this cycle of, I could have saved them, I could have done more, I could have prevented it, how could I not have seen the signs? Two things. And they taught me this as a therapist, because statistically, if you're a therapist, you're going to lose at least one person during your career to suicide, one of your clients. And what they taught me is that if someone's truly made up their mind to do this, there's nothing you can do to prevent it. Loving them, being there for them, opening their, being open for them, all the things that you wish you had done more of, likely would not have made a difference. The second thing, sorry, our kids are out there, and I have ADHD, and it completely threw off my brain. Crap, that's going to be another thing that now I'll think of in, like, a peek behind the curtain. I'm not as polished as I appear on camera. When I've got distractions, I just, like, squirrel, and then I'm just like, oh, crap.
The magic of editing.
The magic of editing. So I'll remember it, and I'll come back to it.
Well, so we have a couple minutes left. I'd like to just maybe bullet point through a couple more. I mean, everything's been wonderful today. Everybody's been so fabulous and so interactive. Thank you so much for your kind comments. I'm sorry we we tried to cover as many questions as we could. We had so many we couldn't get to. But so we have a couple questions about trauma associated with grief, having flashbacks, wanting to put it in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's
let's have you speak to this one.
Yeah. So quite a few things can be helpful, and it's about retraining your nervous system that you're in the present. And so doing that, doing some deep breathing. I love box breathing, where you breathe in and you try and breathe in anywhere from a count of 3 to 7, but it's like a really long breath, and then you hold it for 3 to 7 seconds, and then you breathe out for 3 to 7 seconds, and then you hold it for 3 to 7 seconds. It's one of the fastest and best ways to bring yourself back into the present moment. I call it a 30-second meditation, because you can do it 3 times in 30 seconds, right? But beyond that, like engaging as many of your 5 senses as you can. So getting a soft blanket, drinking a warm cup of tea, lighting a candle and breathing it. If you're an oils person, getting your oils and doing your breathing, like anything that's going to help engage as many of your senses as you can at one time. And so that's the immediate in the moment. And then beyond that, it is realizing or recognizing the beliefs that you are associating with that trauma, and then reprogramming that, right? Because that's like our brain is like a supercomputer. We have programs running. And so you can do that through EMDR. You can do that. We have called Innate Healing. It's a program on trauma. That's not a DIY, because we feel like you need more support than doing it on your own. You can do that with groups, or you can do it in one-on-one counseling. But it's basically going through the process of reprogramming your nervous system and letting them know that you're safe. And so often when we have flashbacks or traumas, we don't know what to do with it, so we push it down. It's not that we want to just repress it, it's that we genuinely don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so that's my 90-second answer.
I love it.
That question.
You're so good at 90-second answers. I'm not. I drone on and on. Mm-hmm. Do you want to? Heidi sent us this link.
Yeah.
Do you want while I answer
I'm gonna pull that up.
I remember what I was gonna say. I remember what I was gonna say about suicide, which is that a lot of times when a person takes their own life, everyone is surprised because they thought that they were getting better. Right? They seemed really sad, and they seemed really overwhelmed and really stressed and miserable. And then for the past few weeks, they were just happy and light as a feather and carefree. And I thought they were getting better. I can't believe this happened. It's because we think, especially from movies and TV shows, that when people take their own life, they're at the absolute bottom of the barrel. Not bottom. They've hit rock bottom, right? And they're at their lowest point, and that's why they do it. But more often, people make the decision, and then they're like, yay, like the conflict is over. The internal conflict is over. I'm going to get my affairs in order, and I'm not going to suffer anymore. And they actually spend their last days or weeks in a very positive place. Yeah. Which speaks to the not in their right mindedness, because the contrast between their happiness and the devastation that follows for everyone that they love just speaks to, it's not a situation any of us can judge unless we've been there ourselves. And even then, why would you judge that? Why would you approach that with anything but compassion? What are you smiling about?
Oh,
I was gonna say that doesn't.
I'm sorry.
That doesn't quite fit.
Match what you're saying.
Yeah.
Just in Super Fear, one of the comments was to both of us, "Thank you for being real." Like they really appreciate it, and I'm just
it warmed your heart, and I'm like, death by suicide, and you're smiling, and I'm like,
it did warm my heart.
That's not a good look.
But I was also thinking like, yeah, we're nothing but real. Like we're real all the time. It's all you're gonna get.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sometimes uncomfortably so.
Yeah.
But
so
it's
interact with us in real life while our kids are like screaming at each other, and we're like, oh, that's too bad.
So for those who are watching on Super Peer is the platform that we use to have our live events with our members. But our membership site isn't on Super Peer. Super Peer is just like, it's like Zoom, but it fits our needs better, right?
Right. It creates better one-on-one interaction.
Or group interaction, like all.
Like both.
Yeah. So let's talk about, some people are watching right now who are already our members. And so we've given your questions top priority, but we've also been answering some of these other questions from YouTube. Wanted to give our YouTube fans just a taste of what our membership site looks like. At the top of the hour, we talked a bit about what that is. It exists to give you support if you feel like you need more support, but you're not sure if therapy is the best fit for you or if you can afford it. And so our membership site offers the things that I would teach you in therapy. We have turned them into courses. Online courses, relationship, mental health, emotional health, grief, trauma recovery. We also have Book of the Month Club. This month's book is on grief and grieving.
Or this last month.
This last month's book.
That we just finished.
This coming month for our members is How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk, because our next course is a course on healthy dating. And so what we do is we read these books, and then we pick a book, and then we create a course not just from the book, but from a bunch of other sources and our own experiences to create an in-depth course on that subject. So next month is healthy dating.
Yeah, and some of our members said they already started it and they're really enjoying it.
Yeah, and we do live Q&As twice a month. Once is the book club, which is what you got a taste of today, conversation, and the other is just on a different subject, so the whole month isn't like tied up in one subject. So
it's kind of staggered.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So we do live Q&As, we do audios, like podcast style, as we're going through the book to break down, not always chapter by chapter, usually 2 or 3 chapters at a time.
Right. We split. We usually spend 1 month on a book. We split the book into quarters. Though the one on real love and post-childhood stress disorder. And so this isn't just like...
That's a couple months out, but that's what we're going to do.
That's going to be a 2-month one. And it just talks about how the micro traumas we all experience growing up, and then how that shapes us, and then how we carry that with us into adulthood.
So this is exclusive clinical content that is meant to give you more support beyond the YouTube channel. It's kind of like the in-between the free content of the YouTube channel and working with a therapist is this middle ground. And the
only reason we're able to provide so much value is because we have a decent sized membership. So it's really it's really stuff we only used to offer in one-on-one therapy that costs hundreds of dollars a month. And it's not about the money, right? But it's like, if we can't feed our family, then we can't help you. But I'm so excited that we're able to offer so much value, so much content. Like, it just makes me happy. And then we have monthly giveaways.
We do have monthly giveaways. We have merch and gift cards, and there's going to be a cruise and vacations and other stuff that's part of that. So
I don't think we're doing the gift cards right now. We may in the future, but we have the merch.
There goes your Texas Roadhouse date night. Dang it! What's the point of even going on?
Messed it up.
So where can they, if they're watching and they're not members yet, where can they learn about that?
Oh, okay. I'll put it. I have a link. It's not a pretty link. That like I'm gonna put it in the.
We're gonna make a pretty link for it, but today it's just a kind of.
It's kind of an ugly link. Seriously, guys, we just launched this a few weeks ago with all the adventure of having our YouTube channel hacked and taken down and then restored. It was like we were like halfway through our launch and
it freaking happened on Christmas. Like, I'm still mad. Yeah, that was the worst Christmas. Like, it was a great Christmas, but it was a terrible Christmas present. Like, hey, Merry Christmas, your channel's been taken down.
And we were doing humanitarian work in Africa, and I was like, this shouldn't happen to nice people. I mean, he was mad. I just laughed about it because I was like, well, there's nothing we could do. And like, even my family members were messaging me after a couple weeks being like, where's your channel? And I was like, I didn't even know you guys were that invested.
Which is a fun reversal, just because historically, like, anger's been your
go-to emotion is anger.
And my go-to emotion is just to be easygoing. And on that day, you're like, it's going to be fun. And I'm like, freaking people took our channel. Anyways.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Anyway, so you'll hear us talk more about the membership site in the future. We'll be putting more information out there.
Really fast, that link that you just put in the comments, when this is no longer live and it just lives on the YouTube channel, it'll be in the description of this video. We'll put that link in.
Yeah, and we'll get a pretty link.
So pretty.
So pretty. But yeah, you're getting hundreds of dollars worth of content every month. If you sign up through that link, we're offering it at $25 a month. And here's the thing, you can try it out, and if you don't like it or anything goes wrong, you just message our customer support and you say, I'm sorry, still love you guys, but I need to cancel. Or if you don't still love us anymore, just leave that part out. So there's no risk, right?
Yeah, you can. It's not a sign up fee or a cancellation fee. It's just a monthly fee.
Yeah, and if you do it and you're like, wasn't a fit, no problem, we will refund it.
And those who are already members will have already noticed this week some facelifts on the site because you were getting what's called the Muddy Boots version. Like it was functional, but it was still under construction, and so
It wasn't as pretty.
it wasn't as pretty. It's much prettier now and
Yeah,
much more
yeah.
easy to navigate. So, anyways, we want to thank you for joining us on this book club discussion for our membership site for our Mended Light membership. On Grief and Grieving is the book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler. Highly recommend it if you're looking for a book on grief. Next month's book is How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk. If you'd like to join us for more content like this and you're not a member yet, go to the link that Alicia dropped in the description. For those who are members, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for our regular.
For our live Q&A.
Yeah.
And the topic of that Q&A?
As I recall, it's childhood trauma. As I recall, that's what I believe we have on the
Yeah.
books because we're.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes it's hard to keep.
But you'll watch for our emails. No.
Is it on healthy? Is the quiet Q&A on? We're gonna. It's either healthy dating or childhood trauma.
On our spreadsheet, because she's a spreadsheet person, it says childhood trauma, but that may have been put on the wrong
Look
spreadsheet.
at him reading the spreadsheet.
I know. It only took me 10
That's
years
what it is.
to actually start looking at them. So, okay, thank you guys. We love you so much. Thank you for supporting Mended Light, what Mended Light stands for, what Mended Light does. I saw some comments about, are there going to be more TV episodes? Yes, I'm going to do more Buffy. I just filmed a bunch on Wednesday from Netflix, the Addams series, as well as Bluey, the delightful Australian children's television show that is so wholesome and teaches like serious subjects to kids in a very family-friendly way, and I loved it. So we're going to do a lot more TV content on Mended Light. So to answer those questions, yeah, but that's not what this live is about. I just saw those questions.
Aw, thank you for all the love.
Yeah, I see lots of love. We love you too, guys. Thank you, and we'll see ya.
Bye.
Hang on, we're still live.
Yay, live.
Don't. Hang on, I can do
Don't.
this.
Don't what?